Hello and welcome to Colgart's Miniatures. Today I'll be showing you how I made this Crash Naboo Starfighter from episode 1. I used MDF board and foam core as a base, and I've taken out all the screws and any electronics inside so there's nothing in the way for when I cut the toy. I'll be cutting out R2-D2 and into the cockpit, just to hide the scale a little bit, using my rotary tool to make any scorch marks, hot glue to stick down the toy, and using Polyfiller and modelling clay for texturing the base. Using a hacksaw I cut it apart, shaved some bits off, just to make it look like it's embedded in the ground properly. Always do a dry fit, cutting the little bits off the ship, just so it sits down flat. It's quite handy that these engine parts come off. After figuring out where I want the ship to go, I use my rotary tool to create all these lovely scorch marks, battle damage, whatever you want to call it. Seeing if the model fits okay inside, because that's a nice little place for him to sort of stand and move to. Again, save all the little plastic bits, you can repurpose them in other bits of scenery. After roughly marking out where the ship's going to be, just go over a few times with your cutting blade, just so it goes through the foam core properly, and you can punch it out nice and clean. PVA glue to stick it down. This works really well. I think there was a little bit of makeup or paint on my brush there, made it a little bit brown. Thought I'd put a bit of mesh in these little gaps and in the cockpit. Using a bit of hot glue to stick it down. Dries in like seconds. Highly recommend getting a glue gun for anyone who doesn't have one. I think they're great. I think a must-have for any sort of big scenery build. So I've misplaced my tweezers somewhere, so I'm using scissors instead. I collect black C's, and you need to use tweezers to do all the rigging with the thread and everything. Now onto the polyfiller. I found that using a knife is really good for applying it to the bits of the ship and onto the base. So Polyfiller is great for these smaller gaps and the different levels between the MDF board and foam core, but it's not great for filling in large gaps and anything with a large sort of space which you have to fill. That's when I start to use the modelling clay. You can create a really nice texture with your knife there, or any sculpting tools you have. Again, it's better for filling up these larger gaps. They have this modelling clay in the works. It's very cheap, it was £4, I think it was on offer. They also have terracotta clay and a stone clay. With the gap at the back, add a few wires, add a little bit more detail. Add a little bit more modelling clay in the cockpit, as you can sort of see down through the toy, and then add a little bit more mesh, just for a bit more detailing. Using sand to texturize the base, and use PVA and water to stick it all down. I add a few coats just to make sure it's all covered. See all those white bits there. They look a little bit shiny when you paint them over, as I saw in my first video, but very pleased on how it's all turned out in the end. Bag up all the excess sand, put it back in the box. Use it for another piece later. It's all dried, I spray paint it with Chaos Black and do a light dry brush with Vallejo's yellow ochre. After that, I then use Vallejo's orange red on top. And then I go on to do different layers of Vallejo's dark flesh, old wood, and buff. For the metal parts, I use Citadel's Lead Belcher. It's quite a nice dull tone to it. And then I go over quite generously with some Nuln oil and Agrax Earthshade. I wanted it a little bit more lighter, so I used Citadel's Avalanche Sunset. Once that's dried, I go over again with the Wahses. Next time I won't do this as much, but I use black paint to bring up all those scorch marks. For all the blue wires and any graffiti marks, I used Vallejo's medium blue. And for all the red wires, I used Khorne Red. For the sand, I use a mix of Vallejo paints, old wood, buff, yellow ochre, saddle brown, and orange red. So once it's all dried, the black undercoat really sort of dulls the tones and it blends together really nicely. Very pleased with how this piece has turned out. Again, maybe a bit too much black on those scorch marks, but I still think it looks pretty cool. But that's something to think about for next time. Really like the graffiti bit there, done by the medium blue Vallejo. Again, some action shots with the figures there. The scale works rather well, I think. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for all my new subscribers. And yeah, see you next time.